Fair warning, I don't have anything intelligent to say about this one. It's a kid's comic. It's perfectly serviceable as far as kids' comics go. That's about the extent of my review. But if you want to stick around, I'll talk about what I can talk about. So let's talk about the Muppet Babies. People of my generation often have a lot of nostalgia for the Muppet Babies. I have limited nostalgia for the Muppet Babies. I have some nostalgia for the cartoon insofar as it reminds me about the general atmosphere of Saturday morning cartoons. I remember in particular being at my grandmother's house. Now, my mother limited the amount of TV I would watch, but my grandmother did not. So when I was staying over at her house, I could watch Saturday morning cartoons all morning. And typically, I would end up watching the Muppet Babies just because it was on. And I wasn't a big fan of the Muppet Babies even as a kid, but I have some nostalgia just for the feel of those 1980s Saturday morning cartoons. Now, why didn't I like the Muppet Babies? I didn't hate it. I actually quite like the Muppets in general. I've talked about the Muppets before on this channel a little bit. But the Muppet Babies cartoon, well, I didn't like it for a couple reasons. One is that I felt it was more for little kids. Now, I was doing a little bit of research on Wikipedia prior to filming this, and it looks like the Muppet Babies cartoon first came out in 1984, at which point I really was a little kid. I mean, I was very young in 1984. But I don't know. Either I wasn't watching it immediately when it came out. Maybe I didn't know about it. Or the other thing is, it was on the air for a long time. I think it was on the air for 8 years, if I remember correctly. So certainly, if I ever watched it when I was young, I must have grown out of it fairly quickly. Because even when I was in second or third grade, I had the sense that the Muppet Babies were more for 5 or 6 year olds. That was my impression, even as an elementary school student. The other thing is I was never a big fan of the fact that the Muppet Babies' adventures all took place in their imagination. It meant that there were no stakes involved. Now, it did, I guess I can say in retrospect, allow the Muppet Babies a lot of freedom to do a lot of wacky or whimsical stuff, but I don't know. What do you guys think? To a certain extent, I almost feel like that stuff is better appreciated by adults than by kids. Or maybe I'm just talking about myself. I feel as a kid I didn't really appreciate wacky and whimsical so much. I just wanted a solid adventure story. And find as an adult I appreciate those things more than I did as a kid. But all of that is a long way of saying I don't really consider myself a Muppet Babies fan. However, my kids have gotten into it recently. They discovered it on Disney Plus. Now, if you don't have kids, you might not know this, but there was a Muppet Babies reboot a few years ago, which you can still watch on Disney Plus. It's one of those computer animated 3D things. It's not traditional 2D animation, but my kids really love it. I don't actually remember how they discovered it. A friend from school might have mentioned something to them, or I don't remember. But for somehow or another, they discovered it, and they've been watching a lot of Muppet Babies cartoons on Disney Plus. Might be an interesting point of interest here. The original Muppet Babies cartoon is not available on Disney Plus. So I actually Googled this, where can I watch the original Muppet Babies cartoon? Just because I thought my kids might enjoy it. And it turns out that it's not available because the rights to it are complicated, at least if I'm understanding the couple of web pages I looked at after doing a Google search. So I guess back in the 1980s, apparently, companies were a lot less legalistic about the rights to their properties. And Jim Henson was friendly with a lot of different people in Hollywood, and that allowed him to do parodies of a lot of different intellectual properties on the Muppet Babies, which you can't do as easily today, and that means that the rights to the Muppet Babies have become complicated, and it's difficult to make those episodes available. That's my understanding anyways. They seem to be freely available on YouTube regardless. But anyways, now that my kids are interested in the Muppet Babies, I went to my library and searched up which Muppet Babies books I could request on Interlibrary's loan. And I got this one, the Marvel Omnibus Muppet Babies. So back in the 1980s, when the Muppet Babies was on TV, Marvel did a Muppet Babies comic. So you can see here all the way from May 1985, issue 1. And the last issue was 26 in July 1989. So it lasted a few years. I never even knew this comic existed. Some people on Amazon who are reviewing this collection said that they had these comics as kids and were very happy to find them all collected in an omnibus. And if you read these as a kid, I can imagine you would have some nostalgia for it. I did not read these as a kid, but I read these with my kids, at least some of them. My kids lose interest in this quickly. They'll listen to maybe one story, maybe 1.5 stories, and then they start to get squirmy. They are 3 years old and 6 years old. So I don't know, what would you think is the best age for these comics? They're at the very back of the book. Let me see if I can find this. They mentioned something about, I think, 10-year-olds, 10 to 11-year-olds being the audience for this book. Sorry, I neglected to bookmark the that quote before I filmed, so maybe won't be able to find it here. But yeah, something about how 10 to 11-year-olds, you don't want to talk down to them because they know... Oh, here we go. Found it. People who are 10 or 11 years old are extremely sophisticated. They know when you're talking down to them, and they won't read your comics if you do. So I guess maybe that's the audience they were searching for, 10 to 11-year-olds here. I saw one reviewer on Amazon say, make no mistake, these are children's comics aimed at young children. So, do not expect any adult fare in here. And that's perfectly right. Although, it struck me as I was reading this that it wasn't bad. And I've certainly reviewed a lot of children's comics on this channel. The Donald Duck comics, Carl Barks comics. And this struck me as about on par with those as far as narrative sophistication. And when it's good, it can be really quite clever. There are some stories in here that are actually pretty clever and pretty fun. And I enjoyed some of them. I got a little bit tired of it near the end. I have not actually finished this book with my kids. Like I said, they get sick of it quickly. But for the sake of reviewing this, The last couple nights I just decided to plow through the stories I haven't gotten to with my kids, just so I could say I've read the whole thing and do a review. We still have this out from the library for a little bit longer. And, maybe this was my fault for trying to plow through it. But as you plow through it, you get a little bit sick of Fozzie's stupid jokes and the conceit about them being in the land of imagination, which they just suddenly slip back from at the end. The stories are both formulaic and very creative, if that makes sense. They're formulaic in the sense that they all start with Nanny, and Nanny will say something that gets the Muppet Babies curious, and then they'll imagine something. Now, once they've imagined something, the constraints are off. So they can imagine anything they want, and each world of imagination has its own rules. But then they'll all suddenly pop back from it at the end and see Nanny again. The initial issues, I believe, are just one story per issue, but somewhere along the way it becomes 2 stories in each issue, which is probably better for kids' attention span anyways, huh? As you can see, the artwork is good. It's for young kids like I have, 3 and 6, the weight and bulk of the book presents some physical issues, because my kids will want to pick up the book just holding it like this, and then I'm worried that they're going to tear at the binding, which they've done with some books. Fortunately, not library books, but some of the books I had in Saigon, some of the bigger books, they just want to lift it up like this, and then the cover just tears off. So we tried to institute a rule that this book was only for reading with Daddy. You are not allowed to just pick it up and take it by yourself. Or if they were already sitting on the couch, I could hand the book to them and they could flip through it. Despite the fact that they never worked their way through the whole book, it certainly occupied them for stretches at a time. They don't necessarily need to be completists about it to have enjoyed portions of this book. So we'll call this a success. I'm glad I got this out of the library. There's a lot of puns and wordplay here that my kids didn't understand, which is fine. I'm willing to accept stuff going over their heads, especially a lot of Fozzie's terrible puns. Except, the 6-year-old especially is at the age where she keeps asking about everything. So then I have to explain it to her. But yeah. Then the last issue in this book, after we get through the run of the Muppet Babies comics, is the Muppets Take Manhattan, which, if you know your Muppets history, this is where the Muppet Babies were first introduced. This is another thing I should have bookmarked here. But they were first introduced in this movie, which came out in 1984. And that scene from the movie is reproduced in this comic, which I forgot to bookmark before filming. Oh, here we go. Here we go. This is a flashback scene to the Muppets as babies. And this scene in Muppets Take Manhattan was later reproduced. Was later the inspiration for the Muppet Babies. Anyways, Muppets Take Manhattan. Animation style is a little bit different here. Threw me off initially. I got used to it after a while, except for Rolf. Could have tried a little bit harder to get Rolf right, huh? The rest of the Muppets, I think, look all right. Fozzie looks a little bit off, huh? But anyways, I have not seen the Muppets Take Manhattan since childhood, which at this point is some 40 years in the past. So I can't tell you how well this comic lines up with the movie. Before starting this comic, I was going to say I don't remember the movie at all, but actually, as I read through this comic, parts of the movie did actually come back to me. I'm like, oh, I remember that line. I remember that scene. I guess parts of this movie were floating around in my memory after all. But yeah, I can't comment on the whole movie versus the whole comic. But yeah, it was readable. It was interesting to revisit the Muppets Take Manhattan, even if only in comic book form. Then there's some information here on the Muppets Take Manhattan comic. There's no information about the Muppet Babies series. I mean, it may have been interesting to interview the writers, the artists, the editors. How did this comic get conceived? What constraints were they under? Why did it get canceled? What were their sales numbers like? All those things that you would wish for from a decent editorial introduction, but don't really get here. Yeah, it would be nice, but you don't really need it. So these are all the issues here that are included within this book. You can get this from your library, and if you have kids, you might want to check this out. It's how much is it? $75 US. Okay, so that's a bit much to pay if you're going to buy the thing outright. Although it did take me a while to work through, so you are getting plenty of reading material for those $75. And yeah, if you'll have kids, you can read it and reread it with them. All right, I'll finish off here.